A rebellious captain of an alien empire sides with Earthlings when he realizes that they could be better allies than bitter enemies. Set up as a traitor on both sides, he struggles to balance his loyalties while trying to find a peaceful solution. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. MAR-VELL, Kree soldier, hero, and traitor. From his start, nobody at Marvel knew what to do with this captain. In fact, Stan Lee preferred to let the Fawcett Comics moniker alone. But Martin Goodman, his boss at the time, wanted Marvel Comics to have a flagship character of their own. And what better name for the ambassador of Marvel Comics than one who bears the name of the company? But forcing a new character onto consumers doesn't really work if the creators don't really believe in the character. But Stan obeyed. Although it's clear his heart wasn't in it. His own artist admitted that he wasn't putting in his best effort when designing the Kree captain's costume. And yet, fans still talk about him with reverence. That has to do less with his early appearances and more so with his redesign, his first conflict with Thanos, and his tragic death, one of the few permanent ones in mainstream comics. A lot of Marvel writers and artists at the time were war veterans. It's no surprise that most of these writers and artists display their frustrations through comic panels. The creation of Iron Man, for example, was a challenge to both Stan Lee and his audience.
I decided I would go against, I would try it. So I thought, I'm gonna get a guy who makes munitions, and I'll make him a real industrialist, and something the kids would hate.
In 1967, the Vietnam War raged on. Veterans and civilians alike developed a cynical view of war with MAR-VELL. Stan wanted to create a hero who came from a military dictatorship, but he didn't have it in him to finish his creation. Instead, he handed it down to other writers who didn't really capitalize on the concept so well. MAR-VELL's comics were cynically made. DC forgot to copyright the moniker of Captain Mar-VELL, so Marvel Comics scooped it up and published comics to keep the copyright. That would explain some of the rushed and shoddy execution of his early arcs. Still, just because the original source material was terrible, it doesn't mean that adaptations have to be terrible. The only good adaptation of the Captain I've seen is in Earth's Mightiest Heroes.
I am Generous Hela's son, MAR-VELL.
Mostly because the show takes elements from the comics and remixes them in a way that highlights his personality and his Kree heritage. There's plenty of unanswered questions and unexplored dynamics in these first 13 issues that a creative team could not only adapt, but improve upon this story. And that is what I'm here to explore. From his beginning as the best Kree warrior to his near end as a man without a war, this is the early run of Captain Mar-VELL. Let's lay the groundwork first. Marv, joined by Colonel Yarn-Rog and Una the Medic, spy on Earth after the Fantastic Four defeat both a robotic sentry and Ronan the Accuser. They seek to, well, it's not really explained in the first issue, but for the moment, his mission is to seek out ways to punish the Earthlings for daring to attack Kree entities. To do so, Mar-VELL infiltrates a military base at the Florida Cape. He assumes the identity of Walter Lawson, a Cape scientist. Too bad Lawson had a bad reputation with the Cape security consultant, Carol Danvers, who starts to investigate Lawson's new and crude behavior. Because of this double life, Mar-VELL feels obligated to help the people of Earth, all the while still holding on to his loyalty to the people that bred him for war. The space captain has little power on his own. He's more like a space Iron Man, relying on Kree technology. Since the Kree live in a denser galaxy, he can move quicker and hit harder here, but only when he wears the suit. He can fly through the use of his air jets, blind opponents with a black light, which honestly isn't really used that effectively, and shoot explosive energy through his wrist gun. He can also reverse the energy, turning it into a form of magnetism. He also needs to drink a breathing potion every hour, or risk choking on our air. But it's completely forgotten about in just a few issues. Honestly though, it's for the better. Too many Marvel heroes rely on time-based limitations anyway. Plus, it's hard to communicate time passing by on a static image. A better source of tension is his indestructible wristband on his other hand. It's connected to their mothership, the Helion. There, if Jan sees Marv doing something he doesn't like, he can send Marv into reeling pain. Yeah, it's not the most exciting power set of any classic Marvel hero, but it works well enough to keep tensions high for now. More often than not, Marvel will feign defeat to catch his opponent off guard and strike back. It's not necessarily that he's weak, but more so that he isn't prideful enough to fight a losing battle. If he has no other choice but to fight, he'll fight to his wit's end. So why did the series not take off? For my money, the series alluded to American exhaustion in Vietnam. MAR-VELL represents the typical soldier fighting the Viet Cong. With this in mind, the series becomes a little bit more interesting. But from a surface reading, the sci-fi trappings were not explored enough to make the magazine interesting to its teenage audience. The Kree seem to be bred for war and conquest. Compassion something rare and frowned upon. Why this is and why MAR-VELL seems to be at odds with his pink-skinned Kreeman is never really delineated. Sure, later series with the Kree delve deeper into their past, but by that time, Captain Marvel was on its way to cancellation. As if that wasn't enough, MAR-VELL is one of the most reactive protagonists I've read in comics so far. His goal is to finish his mission so that he can reunite with Una, but Yon-Rog's proactive antagonism incites villains to get in MAR-VELL's way, sometimes aiding him in saving the planet. But that protection means his mission will likely never end, so his reunion with Una will never come, fueling his angst. And as the series progresses, these villains force the Kree's hand into deciding who he will ally himself with. But until then, he tries to abide by human notions of justice, thanks to Carol's influence. But how can an alien fight for justice in a foreign world? Well, his villains usually go against his Kree mission, not necessarily his morals. Since the villains are the ones moving the plot forward, I'll frame the stories around them. The Captain's first 7 issues are full of villainous foils. Sentry 459 is what the Kree want their soldiers to be. Unstoppable and unthinking killing machines, ready to carry out their prime directive at all costs. Unbeknownst to MAR-VELL, Yon-Rog awakens it to both destroy the cape and make MAR-VELL look like a traitor if he tries to stop it. MAR-VELL can't help himself though, so he changes into his Kree uniform to stop the robot. But this is more so to preserve his spying mission than to save the Earthlings. His first action scenes tells us a lot about who this character is. He fires a direct shot at the Sentry so that it can recognize its power as that of a Kree warrior. Very pragmatic. I bet the Kree greet each other with Indian burns too.
Easier said than done, I take it. I enjoy your species' gift for understatement.
He's not a show-off. He's tactical and calculated. He could have leaped higher to avoid the attack, but doing so would endanger the troops and the atomic warhead nearby. The robot can self-repair, so he defeats it by magnetizing its components. And as the fight ends, Yon tells to Ronan about MAR-VELL's un-Kree action. But the accuser knows Yon compromised the mission first by awakening the robot. Ronan doesn't care for the life of MAR-VELL either, but he doesn't want Yon to interfere with the mission out of petty jealousy. Speaking of him, Yon-Rog is essentially his arch-enemy, but he can't do anything to him since the Colonel is backed up by Kree law. The Colonel, though, shares no scruples when trying to get rid of Marv. He just has to do it in a way that doesn't compromise the mission in the accuser's eyes. But, more often than not, his attempts backfire. For example, the only reason MAR-VELL was able to infiltrate the military base was because Yon-Rog accidentally shot at MAR-VELL. And at the last second, a military pilot got in the way. The pilot, Walter Lawson, was a scientist for the Cape. Coincidentally, he looks a lot like MAR-VELL. This stroke of fate makes MAR-VELL's espionage mission easier, which later influences Marv to side with humanity. This moment with the real Walter Lawson, along with his suspicion of Yon, could have been the catalyst for the Captain's growth. The real Lawson could have been a pilot from the first issue, and characterized with a zeal as intense as that of the best Kree warrior, and enough to even impress Yon-Rog, except his zealousness is what would save his prey, which would later foreshadow Yon-Rog's own defeat for his zeal and egotism. Then MAR-VELL could have begun to question the orders of this jealous colonel, since he suspects Yon-Rog will get him killed. All that effort just to steal away his main squeeze? I guess Una has got it going on, huh? If it wasn't for that incident, MAR-VELL might have had no excuse to stop the Sentry. The Hellion didn't even land next to the Cape because Yon-Rog knew the Sentry was there. It was purely coincidental. If his primary mission was to, retrieve the Sentry to prevent humanity from peering into its secrets, then them landing so close to the base would make more sense. That plotline is reserved for the Skrulls of issue 2. Clerk, the Super Skrull, is treated like a genetic freak by his people, and like MAR-VELL, he's sent to a dangerous mission that his superiors don't expect him to return, let alone survive. He has a similar mission and similar motivations to our MAR-VELL. Spy on the enemy and later be rewarded with his sweetheart, the Skrull Princess Anel. Except, like with Yon-Rog, the chick wants nothing to do with him. Clerk tracks down the radiation emitted by MAR-VELL's suitcase. He steals it, thinking that it may contain Kree's secret plans. But the man carrying the suitcase isn't MAR-VELL, but MAR-VELL's hotelier. He suspected that Lawson was a communist spy, so the next logical step would be to break into his room, steal his suitcase, and deliver it to the military. With his identity and mission at risk, MAR-VELL tracks down the suitcase as well. The Super Skrull gets to the clerk first and makes MAR-VELL's life a little bit easier, throwing the nosy clerk off a cliff. Yet the captain doesn't hesitate to break his fall. He doesn't even ask himself why he would do something so foolhardy. Honestly, it feels like the writers didn't have his motivation or backstory figured out by this point. The suitcase doesn't really contain anything important, just his Walter Lawson clothes, but he's still determined to get it back because the night clerk accidentally activated its anti-theft mechanism. A world-spanning nuclear bomb.
Tell me some good news.
I can defuse it in about 10 minutes. It's going to go off in about 5.
The issue ends with the captain defeated and captured by the Skrull. Ticking in the background, the nuclear bomb counts Earth's final seconds before its destruction. Issue 3 features a mind probe, a handy device that recaps the past issues. This would have been a great opportunity for the Skrull to question MAR-VELL about his allegiances. Did he betray the Kree to save mankind? Would an exiled Skrull work with a traitorous Kree? Maybe under the right circumstances. But there's not enough time for questions. MAR-VELL knows a nuclear bomb could go off at any second, so he plays possum until he gathers enough strength to break his chains and escape. After reaching the Hellion, his pleas to return fall on deaf ears. Jan-Rog gives us his interpretation of MAR-VELL's sympathy for Earth. To him, MAR-VELL is like a researcher who fell in love with his subjects. But according to MAR-VELL himself, he's willing to destroy the planet, but only after the Supreme Intelligence deems it necessary. The Kree don't really care about the complete annihilation of Earth. Even though their mission was to spy on it long enough to judge it, I guess they forgot that little detail.
Yeah, I know. I'm done.
He has two choices here, protect foreign life or prioritize Kree secrets. MAR-VELL thinks both can be achieved if the willpower is there. But upkeeping the Kree Empire already takes a lot of planning and resources, so it makes sense for the Kree overlords to be myopic and short-sighted when dealing with foreign worlds. But what they do care about is revenge and cracking Skrull skulls. So he convinces them that he still hasn't finished business with Kl'rt. He knows Kl'rt is stronger than him, so he needs to keep the Skrull off balance long enough to retrieve his stolen suitcase. It's not about winning a personal fight here, but about keeping the world alive. Sure, it seems silly for any anti-theft mechanism to annihilate the entire planet. But remember, the Kree are a warring race, and they consider their technology and information more precious than life itself.
Now, Earth is part of the Kree Empire. That does not require humanity or you to survive.
While battling each other, the Skrull screws himself over. In trying to hypnotize MAR-VELL, he ends up hypnotizing himself. It goes to show how physically unimpressive the captain is, relying on his wits over his brawn. Another great thing is how both the Kree and the Skrull of this issue parallel each other. Like Kl'rt, MAR-VELL is an outcast in Kree society. Kl'rt is genetically enhanced with powers, while MAR-VELL is cursed with empathy for others. It's too bad the Mind Probe was not used to further explore the captain. Just one page of flashback could have been enough for us to know how he operates and why he cares so much for people, and not just his own. Plus, if empathy is so frowned upon in Kree society, how did Marvel manage to rise up the ranks? Marvel starts to question himself in issue 4. It has the best standalone story in this early run. The issue is great not just because of the clash of personalities, but because we learn more about MAR-VELL. Not only did he outsmart Kl'rt in the previous issue, but his own comrades as well. While in missions, MAR-VELL often bemoans how he might one day bring death to the people of Earth. So it seems he lied about his intentions earlier. He says he and Una still have a conscience as opposed to those other Kree men. So when Jan-Rog orders him to let a German-infested rocket explode onto the shores of the Big Apple, the captain hesitates to act, but the avenging son of Atlantis gives him a way out. Namor's recent change of heart for humanity makes this Kree experiment impossible. So here Namor is the hero, while MAR-VELL corners himself into being the villain. The two of them could have been allies if not for Namor's pride and MAR-VELL's deadly mission. At first he tries to persuade Namor against saving the harbor, but Namor's monthly pilgrimage to impress Sue Storm is already underway. The Kree captain doesn't want people to die, but he can't talk things through while underwater. Without another option, he goes against his feelings and obeys his superiors. This is one of the few times I felt invested in MAR-VELL's situation. A soldier forced to fight for a cause he no longer believes in, killing innocents for the sake of the colonels. Sounds familiar?
Shoot everything, man, woman, children, and the whole bit, everything that could aid the VC, you know, every living thing. That was sort of like the order.
Well, this is something a soldier has to do, is to take orders and carry them out.
Like we used to have to run around yelling, kill, 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 just to get it in our heads, you know, just to get that feeling that you can do it.
Roy Thomas might have been a Fed, cause the plot for this issue rings eerily like that of Operation Sea Spray in San Francisco during the 1950s. Unethical scientific experiments ran rampant after World War II, so it's refreshing to see a comic author allude to these horrible real-life events. Lucky for MAR-VELL, Namor throws a wrench in the Kree's genocidal plan. Namor's stronger than him, and that gives him an idea. After knocking MAR-VELL out, Namor rushes to the missile, all according to MAR-VELL's plan. See, MAR-VELL could have beaten him to it, but he let the Atlantean Prince get there first. After all, Jan Rong is always watching him, so if he wants to stop the germs from spreading, he has to be resourceful. After catching up to Namor, MAR-VELL punches him in such a way that the prince falls on the self-destruct button. Both survive, the rocket is no more, and I guess the germs couldn't survive the fiery explosion. Still, there's one issue. This could have been another chance for him to reflect on his past, to examine why his compassion was not completely stamped out. Even if the captain himself couldn't remember much of his history prior to joining the Kree military, the Mind Probe from last issue could have stopped working when it reached a certain point. And then, since the next issue has him use a Kree memory eraser, the writers could have definitely played around with these concepts of lost identity and brainwashing. He could have known his memory was erased, and he'd be so brainwashed that he would accept the loss of his memory to keep his culture alive. Then again, the year was May 9th, 1968, 7 years before programs such as MK Ultra were declassified. So I don't blame the writers for not having this in mind at the time.
Who was a direct MK Ultra contractor who basically erased people's memories and identities with massive amounts of electric shock, and then played thousands of times over tape loops to try and build up a new personality.
Thank you for watching. With your help, part 2 will come out in no time. With all our players established, next video will focus on a new creative team and how they handle new threats and complications for Captain Marvel. But until then, this anachronist shall present himself in another time.